Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marcel Balt, and I can give you a bio, but first of all, I'm a mother. And I have twin boys, and yesterday they turned 11 months. Oh, they're very sweet, it's a very sweet age. And maybe like all mothers, I'm very intense about getting the best for my kids. So next to my, in my room, you have books like How to Teach Kids Grit, How to Make Your Baby Succeed. I don't get around to reading any of these books, but my intention is there. So my children were born last year. So that makes them right at the end of Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha, born from 2010 until basically the beginning of this year. And we've heard about Generation Alpha today several times. I'm quite surprised how many times it came up. So we're a lucky bunch here because we can go really deep into the subject, and we're a small crowd, so I'm going to ask everyone in the audience, if you have questions, keep them in mind, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask questions to the speakers. So let's be very participatory during this discussion. Okay, so my kids, I look at them and I think, what will be the world in which they will grow up? And I have no idea, really no idea. In 5 years, in 10 years, what will be that world? And my question is exactly the question of this panel. So when we say educating Generation Alpha, how can we future-proof that generation? And is technology the answer? So I think there's a lot to the topic, and I'm going to ask our panelists to come up right away. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Her Excellency Dr. Amal Karboul. She's the visionary CEO behind the Education Outcomes Fund, a UN-hosted trust fund dedicated to enhancing the education and employment prospects of 10 million children and youth living in poverty. Dr. Karboul made history as Tunisia's first female Minister of Tourism, and her exceptional service to her country earned her the prestigious Presidential Citizens Medal. Please help me welcome Her Excellency Dr. Amal Karboul. Right. Next, we have Hisham Al-Habti, who is the president of the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University since October 2020, with a combination of both corporate and education management and administration skills and leadership capabilities. He continues fostering organizational development and the implementation of the university's strategic goals. You might remember, if you were listening to the opening panel, I think you should be very proud. You were really a highlight of the panel discussion. I think 2 people mentioned UM6P, the university that they said was so fast in becoming one of the leading universities in Africa. So let's welcome Mr. Al-Habti. Next, we have Moazi Wilmore, who is currently serving as the CEO of Ubongo, Africa's leading creator of children's edutainment. With a background in finance and international management, Moazi brings a strategic mindset to the organization, and she envisions Ubongo as Africa's premier platform for transforming learning experiences to reach 120 million children by 2030. Welcome, Moazi. And next we have Mr. Caesar Mwangi, who is the Executive Dean of the School of Business at Strathmore University. And prior to his appointment as Executive Dean, he was the Group Managing Director of ICEA, Lion Insurance Holdings. He has been adjunct faculty member of SBS since the launch of the first MBA program in 2006. Welcome. Next, we have Tera Franchi, is the Chief of Staff of Carry First, Africa's leading mobile games publisher and alternative payment platform for digital goods. At Carry First, Tera primarily leads strategic initiatives and corporate development initiatives. Let's welcome Tera Franchi. Am I saying correct? You correct me if I'm not saying it so. Okay. Then, last but not least, Tomi Adepuyo is the partner and head of enterprise risk services at KPMG in Nigeria. She has about 25 years of experience in providing advisory services on sustainability, corporate governance, enterprise risk management, and regulatory compliance services. She has successfully led several transformational large-scale projects in major national corporates. Let's welcome Tomi Adepuyo. All right. So I'm going to go right into it immediately. And as I said in the beginning, many of the people today mentioned education, but I'd like to start with you, Amal. And do you think education is really the answer for Generation Alpha? And has education perhaps failed many of the children, especially in Africa?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll start with some depressing statistics because we're not in an education forum, we're in a business forum, so you might not be aware of them. But today, like 7 out of 10 children in low and middle income countries cannot read and write for meaning at the end of primary school. That's kind of 70% of the children can't read and write at the end of primary school. And when it comes to youth skills, the basic skills needed to thrive or to be able actually to participate in the modern economy, the number is equal, is 70%. This one is global. And in sub-Saharan countries, it's around 92%. So I think this is, I call it the biggest silent pandemic we are facing actually now and in a few years when these young people are going to enter the job market. So we are failing a lot of people, and also what worries me even more is the value of education is decreasing, because if children go to school but are not learning, then I think more and more parents are asking themselves, should we do that? But it's not just doom and gloom. I want to share a very, very quick story about someone who's Generation Alpha, by the way. Comes from the same island I come from, the island of Djerba. It's an island of the south of Tunisia. From a family that really struggled with money, so he wanted to make money out of the internet. And every time he started to do something, he hit a wall, because PayPal doesn't allow work in Tunisia. He couldn't open a bank account. He didn't have a credit card. So he started hacking. So started first hacking SIM cards to have more internet, that continued to hacking credit cards. I'm talking now age 12, 13, yeah? So when your credit cards are hacked, you know, and build a community with other, actually he told me from Morocco as well. So I interviewed him last Sunday to ask for permission to share this story. And he said there were a bunch of, you know, mostly young guys, 13, 12, in Tunisia, Morocco, India, and they said they learned, some of them were better at creating this fake website or the fake SMS you get to click on, some were better at getting the credit card details, some were better at getting the money out of that. And so at the beginning they would use it to buy video games and clothes, and then he told me it was more the pride. For them, these were just numbered. For example, doing this work, they discovered a vulnerability within Facebook, and they shared it with Facebook, and they got an award from Facebook. And so fast forward, when he's like, when I was older, 18, started having like ethical consideration, and was like, how can I still make more money not hacking and not ending up in jail, and started e-commerce. Buying from China, finding a supplier from Alibaba in China, and selling mainly in the US. And it challenges everything I know about business. Never met this supplier, never been to the US. Young Tunisian boys don't get visa easily to go to the US. They achieved, I think, at some point like 3 million plus. Then they crashed during COVID because of supply chain. And you know who bailed them out is their Chinese supplier, who's never seen them. Gave them $400,000 and said, because I've made so much money with you guys, I trust you. Now, just to finish, they live between Djerba and Bali because it's boring to be all year in Djerba, and Indonesia doesn't need a visa for Tunisians. So they have 3 brands. He got 5, 6 others from these hackers. So his team is now 35 people, all ex-hackers. They make up to $100,000 a day in revenue with 25% profit. You can calculate that makes around $7 million profit a year. Never been in China, never been in the US yet, you know. And for me, the question, and then we can discuss this later, how can we make this story a story of many and not just of one?
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because it's, like you say, it challenges everything we know about, in the first instance, what is okay, and, and that these kids don't need the formal education that we used to and generations
Yeah,
before.
and none of them have studied beyond high school, and everything is above water now.
Yeah.
But they had 5 years of dark side, and now 5 years being entrepreneur, and he just turned 25 last month.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What I've read about Generation Alpha is that it will be these kids, when they grow up, they are already like no other generation before them. They're audacious, they break the rules, they're brave, they're conscientious. I want to turn to you, Moazi, because I think you have direct experience with this generation. And having these characteristics, how do they want to learn? What is their ideal learning mode?
Well, I definitely know about Generation Alpha in two ways. One, I have two of them who I live with. And when I say that bold, audacious, and conscientious part kicks in, it really does kick in. But from the work perspective, the way I see there's two ways about educating the Generation Alpha. One is us, right? As adults and as the older people, the way we think about education, the way we think about technology is vastly different from kids, let alone Generation Alpha. Being honest here, most of us remember the time when we actually know the sound of what internet is like to connect, dial-up, right? Connectivity, the use of internet. I remember when I was young, was like, oh my God, there's ICQ, ASL. You know, we're like learning how to connect and talk to people. But now I'm looking at my kids, technology isn't a tool. It is this stream thing throughout their life that they just is part of everything, right? My 3-year-old actually expects to bring to life inanimate objects with just the command of his voice, right? He'd be like, Siri, Alexa, you know? It's very different. So I feel like as adults, one, we need to unlearn some of the things to really get into the place where we can actually educate Generation Alpha. So what we do at Ubongo is that we use human-centered design. By using human-centered design, we're always getting their feedback, and they're part of their learning journey. And that makes an absolute difference in terms of what we're able to create and how we can educate them. So I'll give you an example. We were creating new characters. So we have little lion, this little cute lion that everybody loves, but he needed parents for a particular episode. So we had a male lion. When you go in nature, the male lion has this like big mane, he has his hair, right? And then we had the female lion. We took it for user testing and we're like, hey guys, which one is mommy, which one is daddy? And the kids kept pointing to the male lion.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can everyone please move to the auditorium for a very important session? Please, everyone move to the auditorium for a very important
And they kept going back and pointing to the male lion. So we're like, okay, help us understand. Why are you pointing to this lion? And they're like, because mommies have big hair, right? So the way they're thinking about things are starkly different from the practical way that we're going about it. Another thing that we're really seeing in terms of Gen Alpha is that with that conscientiousness, they're very strong in terms of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So they're going to demand a lot more from us, right? So when I go back to what we need to relearn, we also have to be willing to face our skeletons in the closet, the things that we may not have done right, the injustices that we may have seen happen and we haven't addressed. And I think it's not until we're able to be that honest with ourselves, be able to actually work to try and fix those problems, that we can be the kind of foundation that they need. So I think with every generation, they have a role to play. And I feel like since they're so bold, audacious, conscientious, they have the capacity to really change the world. And they already see themselves as change makers. But I think it's our role here to be able to face that, relearn some of the things that we thought were right, or the way that we do things, so that we can help them become the catalyst and the change makers that they deserve to be.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because there's the unlearning that we have to do as the teachers. Hisham, I see you nodding. First of all, congratulations for all the compliments you.
Thank you so much.
We want to know the secrets.
I didn't give money to any one of them this morning, just to...
We want to know the secrets of the success of your university. But first of all, I want to throw that around and say, would you suggest to my kids to go to university?
Yeah, if the university changed its image about itself. I think what just has been said, we have to unlearn, but I think first of all we have to acknowledge that we don't have the right setup to host this generation. It's very difficult for universities which are here since the 9th century with barely the same curriculum, which is the lecture. So we have the faculty, we have the student, and it's a top-down. And to undo that is not that easy. So they have to come to the university because there are other topics of the education. It's not just about learning, it's not about the tech, and I do agree with you. I think we could find a lot more through the tech than in the classroom. But in the classroom, there are something else. And I will share with you what's happening at UM6P. At the same time, we have what we call conventional curriculum. So it's bachelor, master, PhD. And at the same time, especially in the coding, we have something which is really new with no professor. It's peer-to-peer learning. The school is open 24/7. Everyone could choose his or her own pace of learning, but there are something more than that. It's the peer-to-peer learning, so they have to work in group. Second thing, there are a lot of project-based, and the grading is not at the best of them. No, the last point. This is the grade of the group, so they have to bring with them everyone. Otherwise, no, I'm the best, so it's the grade F, if the last, so they have to work with them. The third thing is you have to do work for the community, which is I'm doing my code, you have to correct my code.
Oh.
The other one has to correct the code, and the machine corrects the code. And if there is a difference between the machine and the human being, so the human being are asked why there is this difference, so you can't cheat. If you do something, for instance, you don't clean the desk. There is travaux d'intérêt général. So you have to do something for the community, like public service. So for instance, if you didn't say hello to someone, so one day you have to stay and say hello to everyone who is passing this school. So this is what we are learning at universities. This community is how to form a group, because at the end of the day, everyone could build a startup, but startup at the end of the day is 35 people. So this organization, so interactions, so you have to deal with that. You cannot deal with that by your own. So we have to learn this somewhere. It's through the family, but the university. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is the university has to acknowledge that with the tools of today, we are not able to work with this Gen Alpha.
Okay. If I can just bounce on that, what you said there, with the tools of today, we're not able to teach well, this generation. So what to do? Do we make new tools, or is technology the answer, basically?
Yeah, I don't know. No, it works now. Thank you. Yeah, it has just been said. Now we are considering this as tools. They don't see that as tools. It's part of their life. It's normal for them to. And I will share with you a story this weekend. So a young Gen Alpha girl asked ChatGPT to do her exercise, and I said, "No, please reframe it as it was a K6 student." And she did the presentation, and the teacher validates everything, and the teacher is against ChatGPT. So this is the world we are living in. Mm-hmm. So now we consider as the tools, we have to consider them as the air we are breathing. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult for us, mm-hmm. but this is, I think, the way we have to deal with that.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Even the concept of tools is old in a way. It's our old way of thinking about it. Cesar, I want to ask you on that point, in your opinion, technology, as you are in education and for many years, technology for you, friend or foe?
Yeah, thank you very much, and very interesting sentiments from my colleagues. Allow me, first of all, to just take one step back. Technology for education, friend or foe, that's a question. But the first thing we've got to ask ourselves is, what is education for? We've got to have a philosophy of education. From where we come from at Strathmore, our philosophy is very simple. We want to educate people to be better human beings, useful members of society, who can contribute to a better society. That's our philosophy. And it's very clear to us. Because without a clear philosophy of why you educate, then you get lost. You wander all over the place. Okay? That's number one. And this is very much aligned to even what was spoken to about in this morning's opening session, that we want better leaders for this continent. And we are fully aligned to that. And we can do it through education. Number two, we then ask ourselves, the subject of that education, we call them Gen Alpha, we call them Gen Z, or whatever else we'll call them. But the basic minimum is that they're human beings. And again, we've got to be very clear on that. And ask ourselves, what's a human being? A human being is someone who has intelligence and free will. So we've got to understand our subject in their very nature. So again, that for us is very important. Now, if this is a human being and we've got to educate them to be useful members of society, how do we do it best? So we do it with the methods that are available, and I think my good friend here said some of those methods may not be most appropriate for some of this, for the changing world. So if we're to ask whether technology is a friend or a foe, it is a friend if it helps us achieve the objective of a better human being who will serve society and make a positive difference. Just as we are seeking good leaders for this continent, those are the people who will be the good leaders, because it seems the older generation has failed us. Right? So that is where we then say it is a friend if it enables that outcome. And it's an objective way of approaching it. Now, we also find that in that education process, by the time they get to us, they have come from another school, which we call the home. And the home, usually, by nature, is supposed to have two teachers, a father and a mother, who passes on some education to that kid. Sometimes it doesn't work out, so there's sometimes one teacher. But again, we engage with the parents, and we have sessions for parents to get them to understand you are also educators, primary educators of these young people. So that by the time they come to us, we are trying to make them useful members of society. You also have to model what is a good member of society by your behavior, because that's what they're seeing. So you're also educators. So I believe technology will be a friend if it enables the outcome we're seeking to be achieved. Yeah.
Thank you, that's very clear. Tera, I want to come to you, and you very much, as CARIFA, is part of the private sector. So how do you think that the private sector should ensure that Generation Alpha can tap into technology?
Yeah, so as a startup, we have a lot of challenges. We, for example, at CariFirst, we're creating a new industry on the continent, the gaming industry. Within that, we have a lot of technological change that's ongoing with AI and different things, and it's moving very fast. And institutions, by design, will always lag that pace. And then you overlay the digital divide and certain infrastructural challenges or lack that we have. I think as startups, we have the need to step in, not only because we are the benefactors of technology such as AI, but also because it's a practical need of ours. I mean, we are the closest to what the future of work is going to look like, and we know where the gaps in talent are. And so at our company, we very much think about what programs in the future we could roll out to develop the talent that we need. It's not sophisticated enough at this stage to say that we've thought about collaborating with maybe universities or other players that could help in achieving that mission. But it's certainly something where we know we got to step up for practical and also ethical reasons. Yeah, and I think that even in the future, if we think about AI in education, I think tertiary education is probably one of the most practical applications, cross-training and making sure that, as Cesar said, we have the skills that we need to be productive in society and to have the talent that helps us achieve prosperity and economic growth eventually.
Okay. So in a way, the private sector is one of the faster vehicles to be able to address the education needs for this generation. I mean, it could be faster even than our traditional schools.
Definitely.
So I want to touch on this aspect of the digital divide that you mentioned, Tomi. So you're also with the private sector, and I think you see a lot of projects where there's philanthropy or a push to make an impact, but it's not as effective as it can be. How do you think the real impact, how do you think that someone like KPMG can make real impact in addressing this digital divide?
Okay, thank you very much. At the beginning, we heard about the depressing statistics of the number of children that can read even as at the age of 10. And really, when you look at the socio-political and the macroeconomic issues we face in this part of the continent, that's definitely going to continue to increase. So when you look at the divide and you ask yourself what exactly is causing the divide, a number of things. One is the issue of lack of infrastructure. The other is the issue of maybe even the technology gaps. That's causing, some have access to it, some don't have access to it. And so the question then is, how do you bridge the gap? Now, I would say for corporates, one of the things we should begin to do or think about is to see education beyond the four walls of school. As long as we continue to see that you can only get educated when you are in school, we would continue doing the kind of CSR we've been doing, which is to give out money, adopt a school, build the four walls, build all the building blocks and everything. But then some of these people are not even within the school. And are we saying that they should be deprived of learning as well? And when we then look at what happened during the COVID period, when even people that were in school were out of school for almost 2 years, but learning still happened. There were things that happened during that period that made people to be able to learn. And if I just give some of the examples, if corporates can begin to make more investments in closing the gap in areas of infrastructure, for example, ensuring that you have affordable digital education, and it can be wherever you are, suited to you, then we will begin to have more people being educated in our midst. And remember during COVID, schools were not happening, But then a number of the universities had to port and start doing video lessons. Exams had to be done from home. So if we could do that at that point in time, that means that there is a way we can actually begin to make that another part of our lives and be able to bring education to the people that don't actually have access to it. Another example is also looking at even lack of electricity. A lot of students don't have access to electricity. I mean, we are all okay here, but there are many people in the poor parts that don't have access to electricity. As corporates, are there investments we can begin to make to bridge that learning gap and ensure that they are able, because even if you have the devices, you need electricity to be able to plug them. You need electricity to be able to listen to the radio that can teach you some things. How do we bridge that gap? And I can give some example. There were some examples I saw as I was preparing for this of Solar Aid. I think is a program in somewhere in Malawi. And they're also in some other sub-Saharan African countries where they actually have a Light a Village initiative, and they actually provide power to the remotest parts of sub-Saharan Africa to ensure that they have light. And so the children there, they can actually read, they can go to school, they can do all that they need to do. And I mean, that's an example. There's another one, there's a company in South Africa, solar leasing company. They leverage crowdfunding to be able to provide finance to drive PV installations for schools and businesses. Another investment that corporates can make is in the area of Wi-Fi. Because if you have Wi-Fi-enabled learning centers, then more people have access to education. So how can we also begin to look at that area in terms of the kind of investments we make, and not just investments in 4 blocks? I think another one is also even looking at, there are some organizations now that are doing more of mentoring. Africans are typically very, very intelligent. The issue is that they may not have access. Sometimes if you actually pick someone that hasn't gone to school and you just teach him how to use a device, you'll be very shocked that they know how to use it very quickly, because that's their generation. And so we've seen organizations that have set up innovation hubs and been able to pull people together. There's a company in Nigeria called Co-Creation Hub. And they just bring people together to teach them technology, teach them AI, and before you know it, they are learning, they've been able to develop other things, they start setting up their own businesses, and they're even creating and innovating in other places. So you have various examples like that that we can think about and just do things a bit differently. I mean, bring more innovation into the way we actually do our CSR to be able to make more impact in the lives of the children.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I want to ask if there are any questions from the audience to any of our panelists. Okay, so if you want to speak up loud, you can address the panelists. Oh, there's a mic. Okay, okay. If you can just, yeah, I'll take, just raise your hands again. So 1, 2, and I'll take the 2 gentlemen here in the front. If you could just say your name and then who your question is.
So my name is Carol from Schneider Electric. I'm just questioning the level of inequality that technology is bringing, especially for Africa and especially for this Gen Alpha. So I'm also raising 2 young men, and they are privileged, but their counterparts who grow up in a village sometimes have never seen a smartphone. And so I'm looking at the next 10, 15 years when this generation will be in the workplace. That inequality, what would you say about that?
Okay, thank you for that. This gentleman in the front, yes.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Nzeki Munyao, CEO of Silverback Tea Company, but most importantly, a farmer. I first want to thank the panelists for the very enlightening information that they've shared with us. And I want to single out Mwasi, Ubongo Kids. My kids love Ubongo Kids. And Akili is a personal favorite of mine because of the education she's giving to the kids. But now, my question is this, as a farmer, how are we training this generation alpha to become farmers or to take part in some of the boring jobs that are required for our existence as humans? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Harun, CEO for CSCS in Nigeria, and also a parent like most of us are here. I was drilled to grow up to learn that books are very important. Books. Read a book every day, every time. In all of the discussions I've had here today, I've not heard anything about this generation of children reading a book. Does it mean that the days of books are gone? And so our parents were wrong to say read a book? Because if I I can't get my kids to read, but I can get them to go to TikTok and give me a summary of that book, or watch a movie to give me an idea of what that book means. They're like, that, I've read it. Attention span is very small. How do you deal with that? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That certainly sound as if you're speaking from experience. Okay, I'm going to let the panelists answer those three questions. We have a first question on inequality. How do we marry this idea of kids growing up with smartphones and having access to technology and the other ones who have none of that at all? And where do these two parallel lives meet, and how can we bridge that gap? Then are we going to be able to teach farming? How do we, for everything that's said, how do we include cultivating the new farmers? And then books, in or out? So I'm opening it up to anyone. Yeah, please go ahead, Amal.
Maybe on the farmer, because I think it's much larger. To go back to the story, so in the phone call at the end, I was like, if you were advisor to the Tunisian president, what would you advise him to change, to make your story not a singular story, but a larger story? And I was expecting completely different answer. I was expecting him to say, to open credit cards and to allow for, foreign currency and whatever policy changes. He didn't say that at all. He said, I think we should change our education system so that children learn to learn, that they learn to journal, that they learn to meditate. And I was like, yeah, I was like taken aback because it was not the answer I expected. And then we talked a bit further about it, and it was like this slogan, learn to learn, not learn to code. Because basically, when you develop the curiosity and the courage, and if you take farming as an example, farming is an industry, if you want to call that, can be massively transformed with technology. So if you have someone who inherits a farm or comes into a farm, and then, the water consumption, it can be like minute to the plant at certain times so that you can use less water, you can use different seeds, you can use planting trees as a add-on. Like, there is so much science and there is so much technology that can add, and it can make the work, sorry to use the language, more sexy again, for young people to engage with it. And I think the basic for that, be it farming or any other industry, is teaching children to learn rather than learn to code or learn to farm or learn to something. And that, I think, technology can help. So for those of you who are curious, a member of the WEF, the World Economic Forum Education 4.0 Alliance, and we just published actually 28th of April, so it's very, very recently a report. I'm going to say the name because Shaping the Future of Learning, the Role of AI in Education 4.0. And there actually we talk about how technology can help more teachers and systems rather than throwing iPads at kids. To have teacher do admin stuff, they help teacher curate, coach teacher, and so that the education system and the teacher can help us grow children who are curious, who want to learn, and who want to engage in an inquisitive mind in whatever industry is needed, and as whatever human being they will grow to be.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Just on the farming, because it's very important, and I could share with you what we are doing at the level of the university. So we are conscious about the fact that it's really a tough job. So wake up at 5 a.m. And at the end of the month there is nothing, and it depends on the climate. And really, it's not the word, I will use exactly the same word, it's not a sexy job. So how to make it different? So what we will start, not next September, September 2025, is we are rebuilding the curriculum in this area by putting more focus on the technologies. It could be sexier by using the sensors, by using how to use an app to see where exactly the best time for the seeding, and so on and so forth. So we will start with something, it will be next September 2024 in Yamoussoukro. It's called digital farming. So we brought people from this coding school and we asked them how you could disrupt the agriculture by using the digital. I have no idea about the curriculum they will have. So we'll start, we'll see, but our aim is exactly to give this flavor of technology in the agriculture. And yeah, because this, without food, there is nothing. This morning we talked about the food security, and the future of the food security will be here in Africa, as the most arable lands are here. But to do that, we need to give, the opportunity to the youth, and the youth are technology savvy, so we have to do that. So I do agree with you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to comment on, there was farming and there was the issue of the books. The word boring came up. Farming is boring. The issue of the books, it's not easy to read a book. You need to persevere. So I just want to mention that one of the things, and we've grappled with this issue, we are bringing up people who will be mature grown-ups. Just look at this convention center. There are a number of young people who have been standing on the sidelines there, directing people the whole day. It's a boring job, but someone has to do it. And you do it because it's your job, not because it is very interesting at that point in time. We have to educate for what I call internal faculties, not just external excitement. Because when we start saying that a job is boring, certainly, even me as a CEO, when I was a CEO, the job was boring sometimes, but I had to do it. And many of you, you go through boring patches, but you have to do it. So it's a question of educating the will. And that's an internal faculty. You understand? And then educating the mind to understand the truth of life is, it's not always easy. Now, that's what we call education in character. We're trying to focus on it at Strathmore. Because without that, then you have very weak characters out there. People who cannot do anything. And we're noticing the outcome of this weakness is mental unwellness. Because they get out there, they're weak, life is tough, and they can't survive. So they start having mental problems and depression and all these things. So education has got to elevate itself with technology or without technology to a point where the young people understand that life can be tough, can be boring, but someone has to do it. Because we are all adults, we know that's how it is. But I think sometimes we miss the point by trying to be at the mercy of what's happening outside, the external realities, then dominate the internal realities. And I think we've got to be very careful about this. It's not an easy subject, but we've got to be aware of it. And it's we adults who know better who should take the lead in trying to lead in this way. Parents are very important in this education process. But again, parents are often very busy. We've realized, at least in my country, they're very busy. So by the time the kids come to us, they've missed that internal component. Yeah, so to mention it.
Thank you. I want to turn the inequality question to you, Mwazi, because we're saying digital divide, but is that actually such a big problem still? You're reaching millions and millions of households, so how do you do that, considering the digital divide?
Yeah, we're fortunate. We're reaching over 42 million households all over Africa. And the digital divide exists. And I think as much as we get really excited about, oh my God, there's AI, there's all this, I'm like, guys, let's look at our electrification rates to begin with. right? So I think there's several things that we always have to take in consideration when we're talking about technology and education. One, whatever solution it is, it needs to be technologically agnostic. There is no current technology that is going to be able to deal with all of these problems. Educating the kid in the urban areas is going to be very different for someone who has no electricity, right? What we need to be able to think about is how can we create the same experiences, the same opportunities in those different environments, right? So let's say the kid in the urban area has a smartphone and they're able to do mastery level education program through their phone. How are we now turning around and giving it to the kid in the rural areas? Maybe it looks like a USB stick with the content already loaded and working with a partner on the ground who is making sure that that child can reach it, right? The other thing that I always say is we need to maximize the resources that we have. We get very excited, again, I'm going back to AR, AI, AR, VR, all these things, right? But we have so many platforms and ways of reaching kids that can also make the same kind of impact. For example, at Ubongo, we create audiovisual, we create cartoons and stuff like that. But we're also creating for radio, because radio is actually reaching more kids, right? It might be a more fragmented market, but it's reaching more kids. And we've actually been able to create the same level of impact at radio than we are doing at TV, right? So being able to think of it in that way. And lastly, we need to focus on innovating for the last mile. Right? Let's not always think about that flashy new thing that's happening, right? How are the kids who don't have access to electricity getting that same deep immersive experience, right? For example, there are solar torches that have USB sticks, right? How can we use that, right? What are the different ways that we can do? We have, for example, all these opportunities around, let's say, TV white space, data casting, that can get internet free in rural areas, right? But it's not the shiny object anymore, and it's all embroiled in policies, lack of funding, and all of these things. But that is the kind of infrastructure that would really be catalytic for these kids. So I feel like as exciting as it is, let's not forget that we can also innovate in this direction as well. And it actually gives us an opportunity to leapfrog. So let's go back to the solar torch. If we're able to find solutions that are using something like solar energy, we can leapfrog, let's say, our reliance on fossil fuels, for example, right?
I just want to jump in there because I want to give a chance to the audience 2 quick questions to the panelists. If there are anyone else? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists. I've learned a lot, and the other participants that asked questions. So I have 2 comments, and I think the first one really is Africa is playing catch up, and we're way behind. I think it's important for us to create the curriculum that enables us be who we want to be. And if we bring it from outside in, we'll never get there. We'll never get there because outside in curriculum and strategies were never built with us in mind. We're just a spin-off of what works for other nations. And the reason I say this is because when we truly know, when governments can identify and say this is what we want to be, where we want to be in X number of years, then we can put everything in that gets us there. It might not necessarily be, this outside-in approach of digital first. It could be other forms of getting education to, the very last mile, like Mwasi was speaking to.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Is there a specific question that you...
No, I just said it's a comment.
Okay.
That it's not a question.
All right.
Then the second thing for me is, I think you just knocked the second thing out from me. Okay, sorry, I remember the second thing. I think the second thing is that we should see the Gen Alpha as an opportunity for us to invent, to create. Now, what we have now is that there are 3 there are three pathways that I see that are, they're challenges for education. And I'm speaking to your question around how do we close the divide. So there's a device problem, there's connectivity issues, and then there's even the knowledge issues in terms of how our teachers or, those, that cohort of helpers, how are they trained? Do they have it? So those are opportunities for innovation. And really, we need to, whether as private sector, as public and private sector, invest in those three to enable the divide she's talking about, to close it. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take one last question from the audience, and then I'll ask one final question to our panelists.
Hello. My name is Alex. So I have two questions. One is, when we're talking about Generation Alpha, I'm not a parent of a Generation Alpha, so I don't know. Are they homogeneously different? Why I'm asking this, because if you go back to other generations, boomers, millennials, then Alpha, for example, my parents went through the kind of education that was so linear. You go to primary, if you succeed, you go to secondary, you go to university, you do masters, etc. I went through a similar system, but at some point, I didn't see the point of going further in that linearness, and I've self-taught myself a lot. And I see my nephews and nieces in Generation Alpha, Generation Z. I feel like they're very different. They don't necessarily believe in that linearness. So as far as Generation Alpha are concerned, are they fundamentally different that we have to relook at our curriculums, our ways, our institutions? Are they going to jump from primary to universities, for example, because they are very different from everybody else?
So clever, basically, yeah. All right, thank you for that question. Is there anyone who wants to answer to that? Is this generation in its makeup different? Just a quick, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's certainly different because they've grown up with the gadgets, they've grown up with technology, so certainly they're different. In fact, and I suspect there are many universities now, for example, by the time the university students come, the first thing they're given is a laptop, and they're given very good Wi-Fi. It never used to happen like that 20 years ago, because these ones grew up with technology at their fingertips. So they're suddenly different, and we've got to think at the institutional level, how can we accommodate them to enhance their learning? And if they learn better using the gadgets and technology, then we provide them. Eh? And that's, of course, an extra cost, etc., and a different way of teaching. Artificial intelligence is here, right? They're accessing it. So we've got to use that even as we teach them, right? They're different, they're growing up with artificial intelligence, so how can we adapt to make sure that we apply that to enhance the competencies we're trying to create? I think that's the take I have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure, you can jump in.
Okay, if I were to add to that as well, most of the curriculums that we run in a number of the schools, they are dated. They've not been changed for several years. And even when we were going to school, there were some things we learned that we knew these things were really not useful for us. When we got into the workplace, we had to learn what the workplace really needed. So we have a divide between the curriculum that people are being trained with and what the work expects people to know to be able to work excellently at work. So there is opportunity to actually change the curriculum and ensure that what we are putting there is more modern, is related to what people need to know to be able to function at work. If you've gone through the 4 walls of school, we've gone through university, some of them have never even seen laptop, but they were taught computer.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw that.
Yeah.
So what exactly did you learn in computer when you've never seen it before? You've never practicalized it, but you were learning theory. And those theory they were outdated already. So there is actually opportunity to change the curriculum. And they are called digital natives. That's their nature. They are very visual people. They learn by hearing, by saying, and we are more manual. We were used to reading books. If you give these people books, they definitely may not want to read it. It's boring for them. But if you were to package the same book and it's being read out to them, or they are seeing it visualized, they can sit there for 10 hours reading and learning the same thing. So we've got to be able to change some of the way we do things, even at work. A lot of our, if you look at offices today, some of our processes are still manual. Those guys are never going to be able to adapt to those kind of work if you don't begin to automate a number of things in preparation for them.
Okay. I'm going to ask the same question to all the panelists, and this is not an education summit, it's a business summit. So if you had a magic wand and you could ask the business sector to change one thing or to contribute to one thing that would improve education outcomes, what would that be? So really shortly, in a sentence or two, I'll start with you, Tommy, and then we'll move this way. I think you've touched on some, but I'll give you one sentence. You have one sentence left.
Okay. I think the other thing I would like businesses to do is to help them to build mental resilience. Most of the Generation Alpha, they are not resilient, and that's when they are pushed, they start talking about having mental breakdown and all of those things. We've got to be able to teach them how to be resilient, because it's not that you failed once doesn't mean you're a failure. We all pass through all of that. So mentoring at work that helps them to see other people's experience, and they can grow even in hearing from other people would help.
Thank you. Sarah?
I think I would like to see more practical programs where businesses actually get involved in educating the future workforce.
Yeah, mine is very clear. Actually, we always encourage business to engage with our academic institution. We've got to work very closely together, understand what business wants and what business needs, so that we can then craft the right education to produce the kind of people that business needs. We are, however, clear on three things. Number one, we want to build capacity to contribute to the businesses. Number two, we want to produce character in the individuals to be good corporate citizens. And number three, we want them to be contributors to their communities, their societies, their countries as contributors. So that is what we call the character part of it. And we'd like business to work with us on that. Thank you.
If I had the magic wand, I would ask the businesses for inclusive innovation. Let's focus on innovation that can reach every single child, not just the 1%, 2%, 3%. And this would actually even help them with the bottom line, because they're probably getting more sustainable and efficient ways of doing something, but innovative inclusiveness.
I would ask the business to look for the skills and not for the degrees. So at some point, I think, I don't know if universities will disappear. I don't think so. But if we are just looking for the degree because it's coming from university A or B, I think the businesses are missing something. So look for the skills, regardless of how these people got training.
Yeah, I was asked business leaders to use more their influence because investment in education has been declining. When big CEOs of big companies ask for appointments with a prime minister or president, they get it. To go and talk with them and tell them how important education is, to invest more in education, to reform education, and to use their voice as lobbyists and champions of education and youth. Cost them nothing but time and awareness that they should do it. Too few of those do it, and I think it would be a very easy, quick win.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's a perfect way to end this. As part of the CEO Summit, that is something that we can all encourage businesses to do, to lobby and to be really the voice for education, because they and you have that platform in many places. So thank you very much to our panelists. Please continue the discussion, and thank you to you.